What's going on, YouTube? Today I am bringing you my quarterback rankings for the 2021 NFL Draft, and today I bring a very special guest with me of PFN Pro Football Network, right? Pro Football Network? Ian Cummings, professional draft analyst, very smart dude, and he's going to be sitting here chilling with me talking about the quarterbacks today. Obviously, you clicked on it knowing we were going to be talking about the quarterbacks. You ready to talk, Ian?
I'm always ready to talk, man.
All right, so starting off with my number one prospect, and Ian is a little blind to these rankings coming in, so he's going to be giving his thoughts. I have Matt Corral at number one, junior at Ole Miss, 6 foot, 200 pounds. To me, he's the top guy in the class right now. I think if you look at him in the last few years, one of his big issues was obviously the inconsistency. He had the traits and he showed it often, but there were those really bad games where he would throw 5 interceptions and then the next week throw 5 touchdowns. And I think he's kind of cleaned that up this year, and that's really helped him progress into my quarterback number one slot.
Yeah, I have him at number one too. And it's something where he didn't start the season as my number one, but as you see, because this class was kind of uncertain coming in, so you're kind of looking for guys to progress a little bit at least. He's not perfect. He needs to improve his mechanics a little bit more. And, while his decision-making has improved, there are a few, hiccups there, throws that are a little underthrown that should be turnovers that aren't. But, he's improved a lot there for sure. I mean, last year he was insanely volatile. This year, he's definitely cleaned it up pretty well. And then you look at the physical traits, really athletic. I mean, he's turning out rushing yards every week. I mean, and it shows that he can move. He can move the best. And he's got a great elastic arm too. So the talent is there. A lot of the stuff that he still needs to fix, it's fixable. And then he's got really good competitive toughness and moxie, which is an added bonus for me for a quarterback. So he's my QB1 too. I think he's talented and he's shown the most progression of those guys so far.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of good examples of it too. I know we've talked about it a bit, and a lot of people probably talked about it, but, the Alabama game. Alabama does have one of the better defenses in college football, and for him to go in, and he didn't tear up the field, but for a guy who, was often throwing 5 interceptions a game, to not throw a single one for him is highly impressive, and it does show that progression. You add on to that I think he's done well just under certain circumstances. Obviously he does have a great running back there at Ole Miss with Jerrion Ely. So he does have that to help him. But I still think he's just done well with what he's been given. Because, he hasn't had himself like an A.J. Brown or anyone like that, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think he's done pretty well.
And another quick thing is that, he's not conservative, right? He's not like a game manager either. He does take calculated risks and he makes it work because he has the arm, so he's not, it's not that he's, being too conservative and that's why his interceptions are gone. He's still testing those tight windows. He can do that. So seeing that dynamic passing ability, without the turnovers is a pretty promising step in the right direction.
Yeah. And in my opinion, like not taking into account what we've seen from them in the NFL this year, me personally, I'm taking Matt Corral as my quarterback number 2 if you combine the last 2 draft classes. I wouldn't take him over Trevor Lawrence, but I think I'd take him over Zach Wilson.
It's interesting. I would commit to that right away. I wouldn't take him over Justin Fields either. I think Lawrence and Fields to me are in that tier above. But yeah, I was talking with a guy on Twitter, and if I had to put Corral in a tier, like I'm not going to put him there yet. I want to see how he closes out the year, but I do think he could land in that Lance Wilson tier for me this year, and maybe compare with them as prospects. I don't think anyone's going to be at the level of Lawrence or Fields, but I think Corral has the best chance to challenge there. You look at Wilson. I don't know about you. I think Corral's physical traits might honestly be better. That's just me.
Yeah, I think his running ability is better than.
He's a better athlete for sure.
Other than Trey Lance or Justin Fields, I think he's probably the best running quarterback of the last 2 draft classes. But yeah, so Matt Corral are number 1, and I think we can both agree that he has shown some great progression this year. Number 2 is going to be Malik Willis out of Liberty. To me, Malik Willis, coming into this year, had a lot of great traits. I mean, he had it all really. To me, he was sort of like a more NFL-ready Trey Lance. He had a big arm but could make those plays on the ground. And besides some occasional just complete misfires, I really liked what I saw, and I thought he could show some progression in terms of, accuracy and stuff this year. And I don't know how much of a true progression he's made in terms of accuracy, but some of the plays we've seen from him are pretty mind-boggling. Not necessarily plays that'll work for him in the NFL, but he's shown for sure that he has that elite talent. And I think a lot of the traits that he is in some ways lacking right now are very coachable at the next level.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of a dangerous pitfall sometimes. Like you say, oh, it's coachable, which it is, right? But some guys never quite get past that hump, and that's kind of the issue with Willis, is that, I thought he showed progression earlier in the year, but then this past week he's tossing 3 interceptions against UL Monroe, right? And then like you look at the quality of play, beyond the stats too. He's not responding well to pressure. He's kind of just throwing the ball up into congested areas, not really making great decisions. And sometimes he tries to use his escapability to extend plays and then kind of funnels himself into a bad situation. So, he definitely has the traits, and he can make magic happen on the field, man. It's just, channeling and kind of using those traits efficiently and smartly. It's not quite there yet with him. You do see flashes, but I do want to see more consistency and structure. And so far this year, we haven't quite seen that linear growth. And so that's a little concerning for sure. But you talk about the traits. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, elite short range explosiveness, elusiveness, and that he's got a cannon for it. So it's all there. It's just I want to see it come together. And so far, it hasn't quite yet. So I'm holding out hope, though. I'm not going to bury him right away. He's my QB2 at the moment as well, just because of the traits and because I do think he has shown, he last year it was all fastballs for him basically. This year he's shown he can mix in touch, adjust that trajectory with his throws. That's progression as well. So you need to take that into account. But I do want to see more before the end of the year, and hopefully we do, because he's a talented player.
Yeah, and I think the thing with me is just that sometimes there are players where you don't think that they'll make it at that next level, when it does come down to that coaching ability. And sometimes there's guys that you think there will, and sometimes you think there's guys that you think won't. And I just think with Malik Willis, I think he has that ability to be able to learn those traits at the next level. And so I think, you take those, or not necessarily the traits, but, those skills and abilities. I think he has that potential. And obviously I believe in that potential if he's my quarterback number 2. And along with those traits, if he learns that stuff, can be a very good quarterback. I don't want to say the next Mahomes, but really, if this guy learned how to be an accurate quarterback and a smarter quarterback, he's in that tier of quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, for sure. I agree. He has the physical tools, so you like to think it's a lot easier to kind of refine that mental skill set. It does take time to establish that. But also, I mean, playing quarterback at the NFL level, there's such a depth to the mental process. There's not a lot of room for error, And looking at Malik Willis right now, his game is very, very heavy. It's kind of chock full of errors right now. So, there are amazing plays, but then there are a lot of errors too. So, yeah, he does have some work to do, but you can't teach 4.5 speed in a 38-inch vertical. You can't teach a rocket arm, and he's not. The cupboard isn't there mentally either. I think he has shown flashes there. It's just a matter of putting it all together and showing that growth. And I think he can do that. I think that's something you can teach at the next level. So as long as he doesn't, completely crap the bed to close out the year, as long as he keeps showing those flashes, I feel like someone's got to take a chance on him, especially in this quarterback class.
Yes, he is a very talented guy. We can both agree on that as both our number 2 quarterback. Moving on to number 3, I have Sam Howell, who started to kind of rebound this year. Didn't start it off super strong, and of course adjusting to losing Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Diami Brown. It's going to take time, obviously, taking those weapons away from you. But I think he started to rebound, and that's because he is a talented quarterback. I know it's a comparison that's been used to death, but to me, he is like a baby Baker. I don't think he has quite the potential that Baker Mayfield does, but I think they share a lot of the similar traits, and I think you see that from his game. And I think that's a quarterback that works out pretty well in the NFL, even if you don't have the highest of ceilings. Yeah, I think he's rebounded nicely, and he was my number one quarterback coming into this year. Actually, the overwhelming favorite was Spencer Rattler, and I was a Sam Howell guy just because what he'd done up until that point was great. I'm pretty sure he has the most yards and touchdowns in college football the last 2 years. And so I think with him maintaining that similar level of play, he's got to be up here. You know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. He's a guy I'm not head over heels for. I'm kind of begging someone to emerge and take this 3 spot because like I have Howell at 3 too, but it's like it's kind of a tepid 3. Like I don't love him for sure. I don't think he's quite as solid as Baker, like you said. I do think he has good natural accuracy, which you'd like to see. Pretty mechanically congruent, and then I think his physical traits are good enough. Not elite. He's not an elite athlete. He doesn't have an elite arm, but I think he's good in both areas, for sure. I mean, to that, I think he's like that 75th percentile. If I had to put a number on it, But the question with me is consistently elevating his team under pressure sometimes, or even not under pressure, even in structure, he makes some bad decisions sometimes. So just ironing out those inconsistencies. I know Virginia Tech was one that got cited a lot, but he has bounced back since then. He's shown progression, which you like to see. So I'm hoping that we can see more from him as the year progresses. And then you talk about Baker. Another thing that he was lauded for when he came out was competitive toughness. And Sam Howell is definitely that guy. I mean, you look at him, he'll lower his shoulder as a runner. If there's a read option and he hands it off to the running back, he's going to run ahead of him and make a block for him. That's the type of competitor that Sam Howell is. And I feel like that's a little underrated when you talk about how teams value these guys. Because having that leadership and that ability to rally around you, that's something that teams are going to look at for a franchise guy. So I think Howell definitely has that. It's just can his mental skill set get to the level where he can, kind of ascend beyond his physical foundation? That's kind of the question for me. Can he consistently elevate teams to the next level? But I don't love him. That's the thing. We'll see where he goes, but he's strong enough to at least be in the top 3 and kind of maintain that first early round standing.
Yeah, and I just think he's the ideal quarterback, really, for a team to take and let a veteran kind of lead him, even if it doesn't necessarily mean letting him be a backup. Like I even think the Steelers might be a great fit for Sam Howell, and maybe you keep Big Ben on like a 1-year cheap contract, but as a backup, in order to give Howell that ability to learn under a guy like Roethlisberger, even if he's starting right away. I just think he's that type of guy where he can go in and start right away, but if he learns under a veteran like that, I think could turn into a very good quarterback. And again, around Baker's level, which I already think Baker's a bit underrated. I know he's been pretty hot and cold recently, but I think he can be that guy, and I think he's good enough to be a franchise guy. For being I think he fits, the idea of a pro style quarterback a bit more than a lot of the guys we see nowadays. And so, being 6'1", he's not exactly the ideal physical or tall guy, but I think he fills in a lot of those other traits, and I do like him enough for him to be my number 3 as well.
Yeah, I personally don't put too much stock into the prototypical size, right? I know some guys do, but if you can play quarterback, you can play quarterback. Like Kyler Murray, I wasn't going to knock Kyler for being 5'9" or whatever it was. It was 5'8", I forgot. But I'm not going to knock him for that because he has a cannon for an arm. And he's like a gnat out there. No one can catch him, right? So I think you gotta look. Like the size is a deal breaker if they don't have the physical traits necessary. But I think in Howell's case and in Corral's and Willis, because they're all a little bit smaller than the prototypical mold that you look for, they all have those physical traits we look for. So it's not something I worry about. And I do think, you got to ask yourself which Baker is going to be. But even Baker recently, I think his labrum is torn, like his left labrum is torn. So he's not even 100%. So it's like, Baker at his max projection is a quarterback you can win with. And that can be Sam Howell, bottom line.
Yeah, and I mean, the only times I'm concerned about height is when they're not necessarily fitting into what they play as a quarterback. And quarterbacks are so versatile nowadays to where they don't need to necessarily fit that, like you said. But like ideally, you're not looking for a 6'4" quarterback to be a running quarterback, and you're not looking for a 5'8" quarterback to be a pocket passer. And I think I identify Howell as a bit more of a pocket passer, although he does have those physical traits, which is why he's my number 3. I just only note that just because I view him as a bit more of a pocket type guy. It's not going to be a concern or anything in the NFL, but I just think it's still something to note at least. But moving on to my number 4, and maybe the first surprise of the list, I have Kenny Pickett. And I've been getting high on this guy. You were talking about someone who, you hope emerges and takes the number 3 guy, and Kenny Pickett's pretty close for me. I liked him out of Pittsburgh before this year. I think he'd shown some nice things. He had some potential to be maybe a backup in the NFL someday. But the way he's played this year has impressed me. Again, sort of like what I said with Howell, does fit much more into like a prototypical quarterback for me. And this time he at least has the size, if that's what you're looking for. But beyond that, I just think he's shown immense progression. I mean, you talk about guys you were looking for progression. This guy, we weren't even expecting it from him, and he just gave it. He's been extremely accurate. He's just made those plays when needed. And he's just been good this year. He's just been real good. And so that's why he's my number 4. He's really rose up the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language here. I mean, I'm a Pickett stan all the way, man. And I gotta plug myself. I wrote back in last October, I think, that he was a potential starter. He kind of caught my eye back then, and I think he's underrated. I think people underrate. I see people saying, "Oh, he's probably a day 3 guy, career backup, to be a good backup." Wait a second, all right? Because he tested well out of high school. He had a 4.7 40 and a 35-inch vertical. So he's an athlete for sure. He can run. He can go off script for sure. And you look at him off script, he can adjust his arm angles and he can put velocity on his passes. So I don't think his arm is elite at driving passes downfield with velocity. It's not quite elite. I do think he has a good arm, though. Definitely good enough to be a starter. I think the big question for Pickett is going to be his hand size, because I think it's supposed to be sub 8-inch, which is not heard of. You just don't hear about that in the NFL. That doesn't happen. Usually 9 inches is too small for guys. So 8 inches is going to be a really big red flag for a lot of evaluators. But
which to me is a little ridiculous, just because the first thing I think of that is back to Joe Burrow. And, I know obviously his hands are a bit smaller than, say, Joe Burrow, but I don't think it's the biggest concern in the world. But
it's something to take into account. For me personally, looking at how he is as a thrower right now, I don't think it's been an issue. And he wears the gloves to kind of improve his grip. So, it's on the surface, it's a red flag because, he's wearing the gloves. That means his hands are really small. But, hey, he can still spin it, man. I mean, it hasn't really impacted it yet. Now, NFL footballs apparently can run, the circumference of them can run up to an inch wider. So that could have an impact, that transition. So that's something that I'm going to watch in the offseason. And I imagine the Senior Bowl, whatever offseason things he does, they're going to do handling drills to see how he kind of adjusts. So we'll see. I hope it's not an issue for him, because aside from that, man, there's not a lot I can knock for this guy. I mean, he's going to be 24 years old, but we saw with Joe Burrow, if you're good enough, they're not going to care. And quarterback shelf lives are longer. So even if you're 24, there's a good chance you're going to play at least 12 years. So Kenny Pickett, on top of that, great athlete, good arm, and really tough competitor too. I mean, I was looking into him when I was doing my scouting report for him. And last year he played on a MCL sprain. His ankle was swollen, and he had to wear a shoe size that was 2 sizes bigger than usual because it was still swollen when he played on it. He recovered in 26 days when the usual recovery time is 6 weeks. And then he threw 400 yards against Virginia Tech, I think. So he's a tough guy. Yeah, he puts everything on the line every week. And really, you listen to him in interviews too. He's a smart guy. Clearly comes off that way. So checks a lot of the boxes for me. It's just the hand size is going to be that really, really big looming cloud over his stock. He's my QB5, but I think he is definitely a top 5 QB, and he has to be in the first round conversation simply because of how he's played thus far. I mean, I think you talk about guys who are pro ready. I think he might be the most pro ready quarterback in this class with all his experience and his physical tools.
Yeah, I mean, you take into account, that despite his possible hand size, like he's still a good passer. When he needs to, he will improvise for you. He's a leader. He, like you said, he goes for it. That experience. I just think with all that combined, the dude's been really good. And I don't know how people are still calling this guy like a day 3 guy, because he will be a first rounder, and it's very possible. I made a joke on Twitter, if you remember this, when he started playing really well, like, oh, does he become, the first overall pick? And no, I don't think he'll be the first overall pick, but I don't think it's super unlikely for this guy to end up as quarterback number 1.
Yeah, you see some high profile draft guys like shaming mock drafts that have Kenny Pickett in round 1. No, stop that, man. I mean, come on, it's super early, and this quarterback class is not very strong, so it's within the realm of possibility. I do think, because I work with Tony Pauling at PFN, who's he's kind of one of those old school guys who's been around a long time, and talking to him about Pickett's hand size, he's like, yeah, he's going to be off some guys' boards entirely just because of that. I don't agree with it. I think you got to see if he translates well enough, but some old school NFL minds are like that. They look for those thresholds. It's like, 8 inches? Nope, sorry, you're out of here. So some guys are sticklers about that, so it's going to be something to watch. But me personally, I'm going to wait and see and reserve judgment until I see him hold an NFL ball. And if he can throw it still the same velocity, then we're fine. I really don't think it's going to be a huge issue. I hope it won't be, but we'll see. Aside from that, he's a great player.
Yeah, I just think I like to just take out a lot of that consideration of like that old school stuff, because we talked the other day about it was probably a couple weeks ago now, but about like the idea of like generic old school leadership, like, and how Justin Herbert didn't fit that mold and how it worked out fine. Kyler Murray, 5'8", you're not supposed to be a quarterback, but the dude's arguably the MVP right now. And so when you just take stuff like that, Joe Burrow's being fantastic right now. When it comes to stuff just being like, oh, he's not tall enough or he doesn't have big enough hands, I just personally don't take that into much consideration. But like you said, something to note.
Yeah, for quarterbacks with the hands, I think it's a little bit different, because like 5'9", like you don't need to be 6'3" to be a good quarterback. Like Justin Herbert, the leadership style. With hands, you kind of like, if your hands are smaller, then it's kind of just, physically, that you're not going to be able to grip the ball quite as well if you want to try and spin it and get maximum velocity on it. I feel like there is a little bit of a correlation there, but there's a threshold. I think that if you pass it, then you can at least kind of meet the minimum requirement there. And I guess we'll see if Pickett passes that. We'll see if it's an issue for him. But me personally, I don't think it'll be. I kind of agree with you. And we'll see. But he checks all the boxes. That's the thing. And I think he could be a top 3 quarterback easily if he keeps going on this trajectory. I think he has like 21 touchdowns and 1 interception in like 6 games, right? So he's on that Burrow trajectory. You talk about who's the closest guy to Joe Burrow in this class. It's Kenny Pickett right now. He's not there yet, but he's on that trajectory and he's making strides that other guys haven't. So he's taking advantage.
Yeah, but either way, we can both agree we're some Pickett stands, and he is my number 4 quarterback.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
At number 5, we have Carson Strong out of Nevada. The 6'4", 215 junior. Out of all the top quarterbacks in this class, he does fit the most, quote, ideal size, even though we've already discussed that really does not matter in the NFL anymore. But again, just comes off as a bit more of a prototypical quarterback. And I think with Carson Strong, that might be the biggest case here. Like a lot of these guys, does have that ability to improvise when needed and stuff. But he's been great. This year again, him and Romeo Doubs mainly have had that kind of quarterback 1, receiver 1 connection going, and it's worked out really nicely for them. And Carson Strong, I think he's got a really nice arm, first off, but for me, mainly it comes from the fact that I just really love what I see when it comes to reading a field. Like he's not, obviously not Peyton Manning or anything. And I wouldn't say he's close in that, but I think he makes the right reads under a certain amount of pressure. And I just see some of those smaller things that I do like from him. I don't think he'll be ever like a top tier quarterback, but I do think he's good enough to be a first rounder and to be the future for some team, even though they're aware he's not going to be a Mahomes or a Brady. I think he can be like a Kirk Cousins or, again, like a Baker. Like he's not ever going to be nothing like truly elite, but he can be a pretty good quarterback.
Yeah, I think he has a better arm than both of those guys for sure. I mean, he can drive it downfield. He can hit outside the hashes. He can hit outside the numbers, and and fit it into some tight windows downfield. So I do think he has a very good arm. It's definitely an excellent arm. He can generate velocity with a lot of ease. You like to see if guys, if they're not forcing it, it just kind of happens with them. And he's got a very easy, crisp release. It just kind of flies off his hands. So he definitely has that for him. In his mold, the prototypical pocket passer mold, I do think he has a lot of good traits. I think he can navigate the pocket well enough. He's not a good athlete for sure. There's definitely a cap there, but he can at least navigate the pocket and kind of adjust his throwing lanes and keep himself clean. And then he processes quickly, like you said. He can see the field and he can fire, with accuracy. The big thing for me with him is that with pocket passers, the margin for error mentally is kind of slimmer, because if you're a guy who can evade, the pocket, like Malik Willis say, like you can make a mental mistake in the pocket, but if you evade a rusher and get outside, then the field opens up again and you kind of reset and you can kind of make lemonade out of lemons, right? But Carson Strong doesn't quite have that ability. You're in the pocket, you have a limited amount of time, you don't have as much room for error. So you got to be sharp. And then also there's times so far this year where he hasn't quite seen safeties downfield, and he'll try and fit it outside the numbers. And, there's a safety looming that he didn't see, and he just gives him an interception, right? So, kind of seeing that can improve, being consistent with that. But that'll come in time. It's not that he's terrible there. It's just, there are inconsistent moments where you make a mistake and you kind of pay the price for it. But getting those out of the picture will be the next step for him. But, aside from that, I think mentally he's very, for a rookie, he's definitely good enough. And then he has a great arm, and he can navigate the pocket. Those are a lot of the big traits that I look for in this type of quarterback. You got to accept the style that he plays, but if you can build a good offense around him, I don't doubt that he can put up some numbers.
Yeah, and I already kind of, I already said this, but I think, I haven't come up with comps for most guys yet, but I think my comp for Carson Strong is going to be Kirk Cousins, a guy that is not the most athletic in the world, can make occasional athletic plays, but for the most part is a guy that, has to read the field and he can make those throws. When Kirk Cousins is good, he is good. But when Kirk Cousins is bad, he's bad, and that mainly strives from him not being able to escape, and sometimes just not seeing those safeties and stuff, like you said, especially on primetime for some reason. But he's a guy that when he's good, he gets the job more than done. And we're seeing that from Kirk Cousins right now. He's been on a killing spree recently. And I think Carson Strong is that guy to where he's not going to be that top tier, but when he's going to be good, he's going to be good enough. And that's why I think he's good enough to fulfill as a franchise quarterback. And like you said, given the right team, can do work.
Yeah, if I had to give a comp right now, it'd probably be, I don't know, man. I'm not great with comps either. I'd probably say like Matt Ryan or something. He reminds me a little bit of Matt Ryan, kind of that big body. Yeah, the big body does play a hand in, I think he has a stronger arm than Cousins, but at the same time, there are some mental inconsistencies there that he has to iron out. But, I think he's farther along than most quarterbacks in this class mentally, because he can do pre-snap work too. That's a big thing. Some guys can't do that. Carson Strong can. And that's kind of something that will help him ease his transition into the NFL. So I like him. Another quick thing to take into account, I know Tony said this on a pod at PFN one time, but he did have a major knee injury in high school, and that might be flagged on his combine medical report. Again, if it's a weak quarterback class and he's shown that it hasn't been an issue since then I'm not sure it'll deflate his stock a ton, but it's something to take into account at least.
Yeah, and something else I want to say is like a very inexperienced Tony Romo, like very inexperienced, obviously, but
yeah, I think Tony had more off-script ability. Tony athletically was a little underrated. I think could roll out, kind of extend plays. I'm not sure Carson Strong quite has that, but stylistically, I do think there are some things.
I don't really remember Tony being much of an improviser, mainly just because I think of that play where he bobbled the holding the kick and couldn't get into the end zone quite. But yeah, and that's part of the reason I have him a late first rounder as well, is because I was saying like right team and stuff, and I think going to like a playoff team looking for their future would be the right move for Carson Strong. So that's why I have him as a late first rounder and my number 5 safety.
Yeah.
Quarterback, yeah.
Yeah.
Number 6, Desmond Ridder out of Cincinnati. I was talking to Broshmo about a year ago now, I believe, And, we were talking about whether Desmond Ritter should come out last year or, stay another year. And I was saying to stay another year because I did believe Ritter did have a bit more to show than what he had at that point. And Broshma was kind of, no, he should come out. Like he's shown everything he can. And, I think he's shown a bit more than he has in the past. It's nothing tremendous or anything. He's still, not even a first round quarterback for me. But I do think Ritter showed enough for me to where it can be a similar case to Carson Strong, where he can go in as an experienced pocket passer that does have a bit of off-script ability, as you said, and can win those games for you if you need it. He's been pretty solid. I mean, more than solid for Cincinnati. Cincinnati's been great this year, and Ritter's been a part of that. And I just think. I was correct over Broshmo personally, just saying that I think returning would have been the better move. And I think he's bumped his draft stock at least a little bit up in his time this year.
Yeah. I'm gonna divert course here. I'm gonna present a contrarian opinion here. I think, I do think he's shown a little bit. I think he needed to show more than a little bit this year. If you kind of get what I'm saying, Desmond Ritter's been around in college for a long time, and I'm concerned that he's stagnated a little bit in terms of his growth. Right? I mean, he's definitely a toolsy guy. He's got a great arm. I think he's a great athlete too. When he does have to go off script, he can move for sure for his size. But there's still that mechanical inconsistency. Even on a down-to-down basis, sometimes his release isn't quite where it needs to be. Sometimes his footwork isn't where it needs to be. When it all clicks, he can make some very, very good throws, and he has this year. But I don't think I've seen enough to say that me investing in him at the NFL level is going to help him develop even more. I'm a little concerned that he's kind of nearing his ceiling right now as a pretty volatile but talented quarterback. So that's the concern for me with Ritter, and it's kind of stayed that way, kind of watching him play. Like, he makes some very good throws, and then he makes some really bad misses every week. It's kind of a weekly thing for me. I think the accuracy, when he, generally has improved a little bit at the baseline level this year. But again, I needed to see a bigger leap from him, with having those physical traits for me to invest a first round pick. It's like, I agree with you. He's probably a day 2, day 3 guy, probably day 3 for me personally. But late in that draft, he's a high character guy too. He's high character, great traits. So someone's going to take a chance on him at that point, and he's got the physical skill set. Maybe with the right coach, it could unlock more of his potential, but still a little too inconsistent from an operational standpoint for me to say that I would take an early round pick with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think worst case scenario for Ritter, honestly, is he's a solid backup. I don't really see any way he's like out of the league anytime soon after he's drafted, because he's a safe quarterback and he's a smart quarterback. And I think I saw what I wanted to see this year. I mean, obviously you would have loved for him to like go off and, be one of those better quarterbacks. But all I really wanted to see was, that level at least where he can be a good enough quarterback to lead his team to something more. And I mean, Cincinnati's undefeated right now, right?
Yeah, they are. They're a talented team, though. I mean, I got to give credit to the team. Their defense is very, very good. And then the Jerome Ford is churning out yards at running back. And he has some weapons. Like, Desmond Ritter's been a part of that, don't get me wrong. But I don't want to just anoint him because his team is good.
Oh, yeah, and I'm definitely not saying, because Cincinnati does have a good team. I mean, there's another thing I was talking about with Broshmo, and I was saying, like, I think they have a legit shot to be, potentially the 1, 2, or 3 team in the playoffs this year, because I thought they were going to be good. And I think Ritter's been a part of that. Alec Pierce, right? It's Alec Pierce. Yeah. The dude's really been great this year, and I think Ritter is obviously a big part to attribute to that. And yeah, so I mean, it's just, he's not a first-round quarterback. He's my number 6 guy. But I think worst-case scenario, he's a career backup, and I do think he has that potential to become a starter at the next level. Similar to a few of the guys we talked, is he's never going to be that elite guy. I don't think he's probably ever going to be a top 20 guy, but I think he's good enough to be a starter for teams, especially if they need it. But I think he can just be a starter alone in general. And I think he showed what I at least wanted to see. Of course, he would have loved to see even more than that, though.
Yeah, and you talk about, mobility, high character. Those are 2 pretty important traits, I think, for a backup, right? I mean, coming in, spot starting, having the mobility to extend plays and kind of make things happen, at the very least, it is good. There's going to be volatility, I think, and I'm not sure it's going to go away at this point, but he has some valuable characteristics that will probably make him stick around for a little bit.
So, yeah, but Desmond Ridder, maybe not a future for any team, but he is my number 6 quarterback. Number 7, we have Kedon Slovis out of USC, and I don't really know how I feel about Slovis right now. He was another one of those guys where, with Rattler and a few other guys where you wanted to see consistency. And I think he's been better, but by that much, I don't know. He's got nice size, and I think he has some nice mobility to him. His arm it's weird with his arm because it's like it's either really good one week and really bad the next week. And I don't know if he's all the way figured that out this year, which is why he's my number 7. I think he's been better than he was last year. I just don't think he's still been non-volatile enough to really rise all that much in my rankings.
Yeah, it's funny that we brought up Kirk Cousins earlier. I see more Kirk Cousins than Kedon Slovis personally.
I can see that.
A little lighter than expected. I think Kirk Cousins is like 202 coming out, so yeah, a little lighter with that frame. His arm's not elite. It's really not. I mean, in structure, when he can go through his mechanics, he can launch it and generate some velocity, but he's never going to be that guy who can rip it 50 yards off platform, sidearming it. He's not going to be that dude. He doesn't have that elastic, strong arm. He does have some mobility. I think he's a little more mobile than Kirk Cousins probably. At his best, he can navigate the pocket, evade rushers and extend plays for sure. Again, not elite there, but has some baseline mobility. To me, I was really hoping to see him get back to his 2019 level of play because he was very good that year. I don't think he's quite done that this year. If Jackson Dart doesn't get injured, Jackson Dart keeps the starting job, and Slovis is backup right now. So, I think that for me, he's probably a good backup at the next level. I'm not sure if there's a ton of starting upside. I think there is in the right situation, right? But you don't want to limit yourself to that kind of quarterback. So I think maybe he'll be a late round pick, probably day 3 guy, but has some valuable traits to stay in that rotation. And if you need him to play, then if he's in structure, he can at least make some things happen. I think he's pretty solid. From an accuracy standpoint, mentally, there have been some uncharacteristic bad decisions this year, which has kind of worried me. But, at the end of the day, I think he is enough of that baseline traits to be a solid backup quarterback, a safety blanket, I think, at the next level.
Yeah, he's got traits. And this is kind of the first guy I don't really see making it at that next level. As my quarterback 7, you're really not taking, the 7th quarterback off the board to be your future. But I think he holds that upside. I don't think he hits it, but I don't think there's any denying that, again, when he is good, he is good. It's just he's not good as often as you need him to be.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I would say. Yeah, it's pretty simple, but hit the nail on the head. When he's good, he can make some things happen. It's just a matter of, getting to that level. And that's the story with every prospect, right? But especially with Slovis, when his upside isn't quite at the level of the other guys, it's even more condemning when he's not at that level.
Yeah, and I mean, really quick before we move on to the next guy, a lot of times, I talked about Desmond Ridder. In my opinion, I think Alec Pierce production has partially come from Ridder. Honestly, I think Slovis at times has been helped tremendously by Drake London, who I do love. Oh, yeah. And we'll get to him on a receiver video if we do that one. So, but yeah, so Kedon Slovis, number 7. And honestly, he might even return for a senior year, probably, huh?
Yeah. If he does, maybe he transfers.
Well, yeah, if he transferred. Yeah, he would transfer to somewhere else, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
My number 8 quarterback, Phil Jurkovec, unless it's Jurkovich, whichever way you say it. I do like Phil. I think he's got a lot of nice traits. He's got some decent mobility. I do like his arm. He reads the field pretty well. I love all that. And he would be a hire because I do like him as a quarterback a bit better than guys like Kedon Slovis or maybe even Ridder. However, I think the team he's been around has been a tremendous help. Boston College arguably has the best offensive line in college football with some great help on other levels as well. And I think Phil is one of those quarterbacks where he plays really good when given a team around him, but I'm not quite so sure how he'll perform without that elite team around him. And it's not like Boston College is like an elite team by any means, but especially that offensive line definitely helps. You're just not going to get that kind of an offensive line in the NFL, 9 times out of 10. And I use this for a few different guys, and I do use it at the quarterback position every now and then. The Phil Jurkovich of last year for me was Kyle Trask, because he's a guy that played tremendously well when given Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts. But without those guys, he's really not much. And that's just my main issue with Djokovic is he's a really talented quarterback with traits for sure. But I don't know how he performs without that offensive line, especially, but that team in general at the next level.
Yeah, and the supporting cast is always a big thing for quarterbacks. Like, even if you're talented, it's a big thing. But for Djokovic, it's especially important because you have 4 guys on that line who might at least be in NFL camps next year. I mean, Ben Petrula, Tyler Vrabel, Alec Lindstrom, Zion Johnson. I mean, Lindstrom and Johnson are probably going to be at least day 3 picks. Probably maybe even day 2. But it's a lot to it's a lot to have in your corner, and especially Zay Flowers, Trey Barry as well, weapons in the receiving core and the tight end spot. So he definitely had a lot going for him in this spot, and he played well. I think he has a better arm than Trask, for sure. But he has that same. He's not super mobile. He can at least move around though. Like, I think he's a little more mobile, has a better arm than Trask, so a little more upside, and you'd like to see that. The big thing for me is he's out for the year with a hand injury, and I think that. Honestly, if you ask me on the spot, man, I'd say he goes back. I don't know. Like, the big thing for me is sell high for prospects. That's one thing that I always try to, think about, like putting myself in their shoes. Where do you think you're going to go if you didn't even play this year? If you're coming off an injury, an injury that affected your throwing potentially. Honestly, I think he goes back, and then when he does go back, he's not going to have that offensive line. He's not going to have those weapons. So that might be an issue for him. We'll see. But yeah, I like him. It's kind of tough to get a read on where he's going to go, if he's even going to go this year. So he's kind of been lower on my board too. But I was really hoping he'd stay healthy, because in that situation, like you said, I think he was in prime position to maybe take over this class, because it's still wide open, right? So unfortunately, we didn't get to see that. I do like his upside a little bit better than Trask's, but still kind of in that wait and see mode, especially with the injury. I'm not certain he even declared it this year.
Yeah, so honestly, I agree. Like, I think the best move for him would probably be to stay for his senior year. And I think if he does stay, and depending on how he plays, because if he plays the same way without that supporting cast, that's great, because he's probably a first-round quarterback at that point. He's got every single trait marked off except for maybe health. And he's playing great even without that supporting cast. So, I mean, if he does that, great. But, of course, you're also taking that gamble of, well, what if he doesn't play great, you hurt your stock, and maybe you're not even drafted. So, yeah, it's a double-sided coin. That'd probably be the smarter move for him. But, yeah, I would love to see that. He could be next year's Joe Burrow, Kenny Pickett, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, for sure. And I do like the mobility, for his size. He can actually go off script, which is nice. I mean, you don't usually see that from guys that are 6'5", 226. Now, he's not an elite athlete, but he at least has that baseline mobility. Maybe runs a 4.8 or something, I think 4.85 or something. But he can at least run a little bit. He's got a decently strong arm. I don't think it's elite, but it's a strong arm. It's definitely better than Trask's. I was not a fan of Trask's arm, so more upside. But we just got to see what happens. We kind of wait to see with that injury, because that kind of clouds a lot of that outlook.
Yeah. So Phil Jurkovich, unless it's Jurkovich, whatever way you say it, number 8.
I think it's Jurkovic.
Jurkovic.
I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not good with names. So.
Number 9, Spencer Rattler.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to drop him too far, because similar to Slovis and them, he has shown that he has some solid traits. But this dude fell off. I mean, he was never my number 1 quarterback. I had him going number 1 in a couple mock drafts just to change it up at times, but he was never my number 1 quarterback. And, that was mainly because I wasn't how sure of, if he was going to be able to stay consistent as you needed him to. And he just wasn't this year. And it really sucks because, with Oklahoma, they've got a guy who's balling out right now with Caleb Williams. And honestly, I think it's really likely that Spencer Rattler transfers to ASU to take up the spot of Jaden Daniels after this year. And, we'll see how he plays there. But it's just almost kind of sad to see because he had some extremely good traits, but he just could not get over that mental hump and was just struggling on so many different levels. I mean, getting benched is never good for any player, let alone a quarterback that needed to be more consistent. And so I don't want to drop him too low because I think if the draft was today, I still think he would be a late day 3 prospect. But it is worrisome, and in all likeliness, he doesn't come out this year. But we'll have to see from Rattler.
Yeah, I'll make this short and sweet. I don't think he comes out this year either. Like I said, sell high, and especially with Rattler, it's even more so because he got benched. Like it wasn't an injury; he got benched, man. He wasn't playing well enough, and Caleb Williams came in and provided the spark that Rattler couldn't provide. And this one's a little bit of conjecture. I don't like bringing it up, but that Netflix show QB1. You look at Rattler on there. Raised some character concerns. Not like a terrible guy or anything, but the leadership style was kind of lacking in that sense. You see him kind of put down his receivers when they're dropping passes. It's a little thing, and it's not something you want to run with, especially when it was over 2 years ago, right? Like people can change.
Yeah.
But NFL teams, when they their character evaluations, they are very scrutinous. I mean, we were hearing things about the Broncos not picking Justin Fields because he didn't fit their character, and that's not.
Well, and the epilepsy was apparently an issue,
Yeah.
even though it was like one incident 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, but teams are just they're so stingy when it comes to that.
Well, and I'm not surprised, honestly, when there's stuff happening with like Deshaun Watson. Obviously, that's a much more serious thing, but I'm not surprised because the public in general is scared of that kind of stuff, and so I'm not surprised by it. But that definitely doesn't help his case. So you got character concerns. Your play was horrible this year. You got benched. You're probably transferring to a smaller school. Yeah, I mean Spencer Rattler, what a big free fall. And so he's still my number 9 guy right now, just because again he's got those traits. But as of right now, probably a late day 3 guy.
His stock is as low as it's ever been. I think we've got to go back.
Yeah. And then, so that's our number 9 guy. Number 10, and we are going to 15, by the way. We never really said that, but we are going to 15. Number 10 is Jake Haener out of Fresno State. Another guy who's really emerged this year. And he's just been fantastic. I don't think he's been quite on the same level as Kenny Pickett because I think a bit of it more is, the stats are telling, people a bit more much than I think it really is. He is a talented quarterback in some respects, but I don't think he's really on the same level as, like, say, a Kenny Pickett. Has been great, though, this year. He's definitely made himself at the very least draftable, and if anything, is for sure an undrafted free agent at this point because he's shown a good amount of stuff. I want to see him keep it up for an entire season. He's a little bit undersized, again, for the type of way he likes to play. And I know he's not, I wouldn't label this guy as a pro-style quarterback, but, he's a little undersized, and I think his frame is a very small frame. And so, all in all, he's my number 10 right now, but if he keeps playing like this, can rise into, like, the day 2 conversation. Fresno State obviously not playing the best of competition, but he has been pretty good this year.
Yeah, for sure. I see him as a day 3 guy, but I like him. The size is a little undersized. Like for me, I only look at it when he's under 200 pounds, right? Maybe a little fragile. And we've seen he has dealt with injuries this year, but there was that one game, I forgot who it was against, but he kind of suffered a rib injury. He was kind of gutting it out. He was just playing. You could tell he was in a lot of pain. But it was reminiscent of that one Matthew Stafford game all the way back when Stafford was like groaning in pain and still just kind of throwing the ball, just slinging it. That was kind of Jake Haener, and he ended up winning the game for them. And that toughness is definitely valuable. And then you look at his traits. I don't think the cupboard's bare there, kind of like Keaton Slovis. Not elite, but I do think he has a good arm. Maybe not the strongest arm, but he can definitely adjust his trajectory, his arm angle. He's pretty elastic, and then he's mobile enough too. Like not an elite athlete either, but can at least extend plays when he needs to, when he has a lane. So he's an interesting player. I think a very solid backup, and I would honestly think like if it's between him and Slovis on day 3. Like, I might pick Haener. I don't know. Like, I don't think the gap between them is big enough for me to say I wouldn't pick Haener. The toughness is big, the ability to adjust his arm angles, and obviously a good enough athlete to extend plays when he needs to.
Yeah, similar case with me. Like, even though he's below Slovis in there, it's the same case because this is up to week 7 it is now, or week
Yeah.
8. Like, if the draft was today, I'm taking him over some other guys like Slovis or Rattler. It's just like right now he's here. But for me, like, he doesn't falter under pressure. He shows up in the big situations. I know people have been like talking about the Wyoming game, but he wasn't bad. He just didn't put up yardage. Like, he was still there when they needed him to be. He made throws, and that's been the case all year. So if he keeps it up, I think he can work himself into that day 2 conversation. There's enough there to where he's not going to be a first round quarterback for sure, but he can move himself up there though.
Yeah.
And then moving on to our number 11 guy, Tanner Morgan, who has enjoyed a bit of a nice rebound season after what was a pretty trash season last year. Let's be honest. He was not good. He was not very good for Minnesota, even with the help of Rashad Bateman. But I think he's rebounded pretty nicely this year. I think he is a draftable quarterback, can be a backup. Don't ever see him being a starter or the future of a team, but I think he has enough there to where he can develop into a solid backup for a team. And especially, as someone who can come in if you're having a quarterback with injury concerns or an older guy, I think he could go in there and at the very least give some nice competition. An experienced guy, that does know what he's doing for the most part. He's struggled with some of those, core mechanics in the past and still does. He's still my number 11 quarterback, but I think he's shown some nice rebound from from last year.
Yeah, ironically, the guy he reminds me of kind of looks a little bit like him, Cooper Rush. Like
Cooper
I
Rush.
I don't think he's gonna be a starter. He's not a starter, but yeah, the arm just isn't where it needs to be, and he's not a great athlete either. The upside is very limited with Morgan, but he's experienced. He's a good leader. I think those are traits that you'll look for. If he doesn't get drafted, he'll definitely get a camp invite and maybe stick around on a practice squad. That's kind of the peak projection for him. I think I don't see a ton of upside, but at least having that experience and having that leadership ability. And last year was kind of a tough year. COVID-19 kind of impacted the season, and his dad died too, which kind of always impacts you. So
yeah,
he definitely has been through some adversity, and he's rebounding this year. If he gets drafted, it'll be late, but I think he has the chance to stick around as a backup for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I see all that for Morgan. He's an experienced guy, but yeah, obviously not very high ceiling. Then our number 12 guy, Brock Purdy, and I really wish he would. I could have put him higher. He's been battling with an extremely bad offensive line, but I don't know. He's just not showing me what I wanted this year. Like I was a big fan of his before this year. I was really hoping he would kind of go off, but I don't know if it's mainly because of the offensive line, but again, just not showing me what I want from a senior who's been around for a little bit now. Just not the ideal size for the game that he does play. I don't think his arms especially strong or anything. I think he's pretty accurate, and to me he's pretty immobile. And again, maybe that's the offensive line, but I don't know how much you can really blame on that, just because again, as a senior, just not show me what I wanted to see. But and that's unfortunate because I did like Purdy, but just not been what I hoped he would.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and he definitely has some fans. I just heading into his projection, into his scouting report, I wasn't sure. I hadn't seen a lot of him, and I'd heard he had some upside, And then looking at him, I do think that he's a decent athlete for the position, but again, not elite, right? I mean, he's not. He can't really create as a runner or as a guy in the pocket. He can't create windows, open lanes, and kind of extend plays at an elite level. And then his arm too. Like I do think he can go off script a little bit, off platform, but generating velocity and pushing that velocity downfield. He's not very good at doing that, and I think that the decision making can be a little up and down at times. Sometimes he has to put this team on his back, because like you said, the offensive line isn't great; they fall behind sometimes. So, it's kind of a really unsavory situation for him. But he doesn't always respond well to that pressure. So I think he's kind of a volatile guy who doesn't have a ton of physical upside. I think he has more than. I would say he has more than Tanner Morgan, but that's not, that's a low bar to clear, and he doesn't a ton. So I think, for me, he's an ideal backup. he's a good character guy. Again, he's pretty tough as a competitor, and then he's got decent mobility and a decent arm, like an average arm, but not really a guy that's ever going to be a starter. I think he'll get some reps maybe because a starter gets injured or something, and he'll be up and down. Kind of that prototypical backup that you'd expect.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to say for Purdy, to be honest. I think I already did. Just disappointed me a bit this year because I did like his upside. But moving on to number 13, Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA. Started the year off pretty hot. I don't think he's been quite as good, in the past couple weeks, but he's still been good enough for UCLA to be winning games and still been playing pretty well. I think he moves pretty nicely in the pocket. So he makes up for that, like, quote, lack of size, but how many times have we already talked about how much it really doesn't matter? As a senior, not ideally what you're looking for to be like, your big year to prove to scouts that you deserve to be drafted. I don't know if he does get drafted. Probably not. I see him as more of a UDFA. But I do think he's shown some nice, some nice reps, nice mobility. I think he can make it as a backup on a roster just because I think he does bring that leadership in some ways and that mobility that, sometimes you're looking for as a backup since, they're not getting starting reps in a week. So I think he can be that, but otherwise probably not drafted. And he's just been, not the best since that kind of hot start.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't watched a ton of him this year, but, looking at him last year's tape, when I was doing a scouting report, I will say this. I think he has some upside, not going to lie. Like, I think he's a good athlete. I think he has a good arm. His arm is one of the more elastic ones I've seen. And when I talk about elasticity, it's a term I like to use. There's multiple things that go into that. It's generating velocity. It's also adjusting your arm angles. It's being able to throw off platform and kind of generate that torque without having maximum hip rotation and without having that strong platform. So having that, I think he's shown he can do that. But if he hasn't put it together consistently, then probably a day 3 guy at best. But I will say he has upside. Like, I was a little more impressed with him than I expected to be when I watched him before the season. I'm kind of intrigued to go back and watch and see what he did this year. He definitely hasn't done enough to enter the top, 5-10 quarterback conversation, in my opinion. But he's got some traits for sure. He's got some talent, and maybe in the right situation, kind of develops into a quality backup spot starter. I think he's got some upside for sure.
Yeah, and some experience as well under his belt. So that's why I say I think he can be someone that makes the roster as a backup someday. But yeah, so Dorian Thompson-Robinson at number 13. Our penultimate quarterback, Dylan Gabriel at number 14. Again, a bit of a smaller guy. He's actually pretty, he's a decently strong guy actually, because he does like to run, probably a bit more than the average quarterback in this class. It's kind of weird being, the 14 quarterback on the board, but I think he actually is, one of the better running quarterbacks of the class. Maybe besides a guy like, Rattler or Corral in them, maybe even the best. I wouldn't say that he is the best, but he's one of the better guys. Throwing ability, I think, is a little bit underrated as well. It doesn't bring like an elite arm, but he can chuck it, a good 30, 40 yards if needed. And it doesn't look like he's giving too much effort to do so. Not the most accurate guy in the world. And that's mainly what it comes from is he's a solid runner, but just not the best passer in the world. Got some solid pocket presence. I think he's just like a solid guy all around, but really lacks anything good or elite. And that includes passing, which is why he's so low for me. But a guy that definitely holds some upside, and like a few of the other guys we've just talked about, can develop into a solid backup, I think.
Yeah, definitely good mobility, a decent arm, right? Like it's not a weak arm by any means. It's not an elite arm, but it can definitely put some velocity on it. The accuracy is the big concern, and the mechanics as well. And having a season-ending injury now, that's going to dilute his stock even more. And maybe I don't think he gets drafted personally, but I do think he could be a guy who, again, gets that camp opportunity, sticks around, and, maybe gets some spot starting opportunities. And I feel like in that opportunity, he's kind of a gunslinger. He's going to take some chances. I think, you could see him go like 300 yards, like 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions or something like that. Like, he'll be a little productive, but there'll be some mistakes too. So I think, but again, he's a guy who will do enough on a positive note to maybe earn and keep a backup job. We'll see. I do think he has that ability. It kind of gets congested in these lower ranks with these guys who are kind of fighting for backup spots. So there's only 32 backup spots across the league, and then 32 third-string spots beyond that. So it's kind of fighting for real estate. But I think he's a guy who could be in that equation.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I think he holds that upside. And he's a UDFA to me. Like I think someone will sign him because that that mobility is at least interesting to teams for sure, and can develop into a backup. But yeah, that's really a ceiling.
Yeah, I gotta see who number 15 is now. I gotta see who makes the
number
cut.
15. Our last player on the list is gonna be JT Daniels.
Okay.
Upside for sure. I know he was a lot of people's picks to be like that emerging quarterback this year, and he still has that potential, but he's not played. So, I mean, take that as you will. Does have some nice traits, can be accurate at times. I think the arm is a little bit underrated. To me, his pocket presence is really what lets him down. Even with a very solid offensive line at Georgia, he just never really had that pocket presence to me, and that was especially worse when he suffered, with core mechanics. Extending plays also hurt him. It was a lot of those things where, like, yeah, he has a solid arm, he's got some decent accuracy, but extending plays was just a no, and that's especially worse when you've got, again, a pretty good offensive line, and it's going to get even worse once you go to the NFL. Add on the fact that he hasn't played this year. If he had been playing, who knows? Because, George Pickens out. Has he been out? Actually, yeah, he's still been out. Yeah, and just all I considered, yeah, he's got upside. I think more than likely it wouldn't make any sense for him to come out this year. He will return. But if he were to, for some reason, enter the draft, I think he'd be picked up as a UDFA just because, again, he's got that upside and he's shown some of those traits, but, he's not far from the best quarterback in the world right now.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I never saw it with JT Daniels. Again, not very mobile. The pocket presence, again, is kind of a big issue, which when you're not a mobile quarterback, you should at least be expected to kind of compensate with your pocket presence. We know Carson Strong does that to an extent. We know Phil Jurkovec did that to an extent. JT Daniels doesn't really do that consistently right now. And the arm isn't elite either. I think it's an above average arm for sure, but it's not elite. So I just didn't see a ton of overall universal upside with this guy. Now he's been injured. Stetson Bennett has been playing well in his absence. When he gets healthy, I don't know what the timetable is. I haven't kept up with it. But when he's healthy, I don't even know if he sees the field again because Stetson Bennett is playing well enough. Kirby Smart, we know, he just goes with the guy who's good enough to do it. If Stetson Bennett's rolling, I don't see a ton of reasons to put JT back in. So, I mean, I don't see a lot of upside. I don't see a clear path to getting that job back. Like maybe they'll insert him back in. We'll see. But, to me, I think UDFA is pretty accurate for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think right now I don't see him coming out. I mean, I pretty much ranked all the guys, and not everyone, because like certain guys, they're not coming out. Like I could have had Grayson McCall on here, but I don't. Like JT Daniels at least still has that chance he comes out. But what's probably going to happen is he probably comes back for senior year, but transfers, and probably rebuilds his stock enough to be like a late day 3 pick next year. But for right now, he is still my number 15 guy. If there were any other guys I wanted to talk about, was not in my top 15. No big names really come up like immediately to me, but a few guys do have at least some notable names out there. Jaden Daniels, we'll see with him. I think he'll probably come out this year. Talia Tagovailoa, it was playing solid, and then those big games just really hasn't done much. Michael Penix Jr. has been okay at times for Indiana, and then some of the big names that are maybe a bit under the radar. Chase Garbers out of Cal, Adrian Martinez out of Nebraska, Terry Wilson out of New Mexico, and Cole Kelly out of southeastern Louisiana. If you haven't seen any of those guys, I would recommend at least go taking a look at them. Hold a bit of upside and potential. Any guys you want to talk about, Ian?
Yeah, it's funny you didn't bring any of them up actually, so I can go all the way on the list. We're good. We got some differentiation here, which is nice. I just got a chance to look at Cole Kelly yesterday, and he was intriguing. I don't know if I don't love him, but again, intriguing traits. Caleb Elby, this one for Western Michigan. He's been pretty poised and accurate. I think he has a good arm. Not a great athlete at all. Not really a guy who can extend plays, but as a pocket passer, has some of the foundational traits you want. Will Levis is the top 10 quarterback for me right now. That's mainly me banking on upside. He's a great athlete with a very good arm. He can generate velocity with ease. He's a pretty tough competitor, and he's very early in his developmental track as a starter. He only had 102 attempts coming into this year. And last week against the Georgia defense, I thought he actually played pretty well. He had some dimes that were dropped in tight windows. He wasn't super. He didn't get forced into making a ton of mistakes by that defense, which is pretty impressive. So I want to keep seeing him trend up, but I think Levis could have the upside to maybe enter that top 5-10 conversation. We'll see if he can close out the year on a strong note. And then one more guy, I gotta. And this guy's kind of a punching bag, but Bo Nix. He's the guy who I know, like exactly, like you laugh and I laugh, but I do think. He's not where he needs to be at all right now. And, he's kind of a meme on the college football sphere, but here's the thing. Like I wrote up a scouting report, I got assigned it, and I was like, all right, he's probably going to suck, right? And he's not a great quarterback right now. He's very volatile, very up and down on the film. Like he'll make a great play and then a terrible play, and then like 5 billion terrible plays and 4 billion great plays. Yeah, it's very up and down, like the absolute roller coaster. But he has upside, man. I mean, he's a great athlete, and his off-script ability is some of the most natural off-script ability that I've seen in this class. Like he can run, he can go off platform, and he can just sling it. A very, very elastic arm. The problem is he hasn't put it together yet. I don't know if he's going to, right? Like mechanically, he's pretty inconsistent. And then against pressure, he's not very poised against pressure. He will run at the slightest hint of pressure and implode plays. And, that's how his really amazing, just like otherworldly plays happen. But that's also how he funnels himself 15 yards back and gets sacked. And then they have to punt. So he's the absolute roller coaster. And but as an evaluator, you're not supposed to, use hyperbole. Like I'm not going to say, oh, this guy sucks. He has some upside for sure. It's just a matter of can he refine his mental work, can he kind of channel his game around that? I'm kind of holding out hope because he could be a good quarterback if he can reach that potential, but some guys with the traits never quite put it together, as we've seen. So
yeah, no, I see that upside from Bo Nix for sure. I just think he's shown some great plays, and honestly, if he was just a smarter guy, he's definitely a draftable quarterback. But to be honest, I don't think a team even signs him as a free agent. To be honest, just because
he should go back personally. Like honestly, I think that's the only way. Unless he finishes on a strong note, the only way you potentially get that draft buzz is by going back and keeping to improve. I think here's the thing. I don't have a good grasp of his in structure work because he never stays in structure long enough. Because he always invades the pocket, just like habitually. He leaves clean pockets, so it's tough. He never gives himself an opportunity to make those plays. So it's rough. I think he'd be a UDFA right now if he came out, but he has upside to rise up forward. Not sure if he'll be able to do it this year, though.
Yeah, I just think him and De'Aaron King are pretty much in the exact same boat to where, yeah, they make some cool college plays sometimes, but I just don't think there's any shot that they ever translate to the next level. And so I just think
Nix has more upside than King.
Nix definitely has more upside. I just don't think that there's any way he ever really himself ever even hits on it, just because. Yeah, he's just not that smart of a quarterback, and it hurts him in the end. But I think the video has been long enough for the people watching it. Not even sure how long it's gone. I guess you guys will see when you look at the final product. But thanks again for Ian Cummings coming on to this video with me. And it's up to him, but we might do some more of these and have fun talking about these draft guys, give each other some knowledge, share our opinions, and you guys make sure to share your opinions down in the comments below. What are your top 15 quarterbacks? Who do you like? Who do you not like? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see all you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.